This lecture is the first of 2 lectures pertaining to the human body and orientation. This lecture is designed to go with the Anatomy and Physiology 1 class. I'm Dr. Stinson, the instructor. I'm not going to read each of the slides to you because I figure you can read as good as I can, but I'll try to summarize some of the key points and maybe add some information that may help you remember some of the information. But anything that's on the slide, it would be important to know for the test. You can also download the PowerPoint presentation and print out the information on the slides on paper so that you can avoid having to recopy all this information. But basically, the definition of anatomy and physiology is such that anatomy is the study of structure of the body parts. Physiology is the study of the function of the body parts. You need to know the different subdivisions of anatomy, such as gross anatomy, regional anatomy, systemic anatomy, and surface anatomy. You need to know what the difference between those are and how to be able to define those terms. Also, you need to know what microscopic anatomy is and the difference in cytology and histology. You need to know what developmental anatomy is. That's the study of anatomical physiology through the development of life. And embryology is the study of those developments before birth. In order to study anatomy, one must be able to know the anatomical terminology and be able to observe, manipulate, palpate, and auscultate. The term auscultate is basically what is known commonly as listening to the stethoscope. When you listen to the heart sounds or lung sounds through the stethoscope, that's called auscultation. Know that physiology can be divided into physiology based on organ systems, or you can have physiology focused on cellular metabolism or molecular level metabolism. And to study physiology, it's helpful to understand basic physical principles such as electrical currents, pressure, movement, as well as basic chemical principles. Anatomy and function are related to each other. The function that a part of the body performs is related to its anatomical features. The features are anatomically designed to perform a particular function. This is known as the principle of complementarity. As an example, I use this wrench in the choice of 3 tools that can be used with the wrench. There's the screws, there's a nut, and there's nails. By the way the wrench is made, it's designed to fit in with the nut, not the screw or the nail. So the wrench is designed to fit around the nut, so it's complementary. The anatomy is complementary to the physiology of the wrench. Or you need to know that the human body is very organized. It's not thrown together haphazardly. It's very organized and systemic, from a cellular to a systemic level. The smallest, you need to be able to identify the level of organization from the smallest to the more complicated, starting at the chemical level, the cellular level, the tissue level, the organ level, the organ system level, and the organism level, and be able to know what these mean. For example, know that tissues are made up of groups of similar cells. Organs are made up of groups of similar tissues. Organ systems are made up of organs that perform similar function. These charts shows that same information in graphical or cartoon form. Chemical levels form cellular level, then forms tissues, forms organs, organ systems, and then organism. We'll look at some of the necessary life functions. These are the 8 necessary life functions that all 8 of these need to be present for life to take place. Most of this is fairly self-explanatory, but obviously maintaining boundaries is important for an organism to exist, because you need to keep what's inside and what's outside. The skin separates the human inside from its environment. Plasma membrane separates individual cells. Movement is also important for life function. Movement is accomplished by the muscular system. Movement of body parts is accomplished by skeletal muscles. Movements of blood is accomplished by the cardiac muscle, etc. Responsiveness is the ability to sense and respond to a stimulus. Digestion is the breakdown of ingested foodstuffs, followed by absorption of that foodstuff into the blood. Metabolism has to do with all the chemical reactions that occur in the body cells. These usually involve the breakdown of some molecules or the synthesis of molecules. Excretion involves removal of these wastes that take place from metabolism and digestion. For example, urea is from breakdown of proteins and excreted through urine. Carbon dioxide is from metabolism and is excreted through the lungs. Feces is a result of unabsorbed foods and excreted through the rectum. Reproduction basically involves, at cellular level, it involves division of cells for growth or repair of the organism. At the organismal level, reproduction is responsible for the production of offspring. And growth is just simply the increase in size of a body part or an organism. There are 11 organ systems that work together to maintain life, and in this class we're going to emphasize only 3 or 4, but in Anatomy Part 2 we'll emphasize the remainder of the organ systems. I'll briefly go over those organ systems now, though. First of all, the integumentary system involves the external covering, basically the skin, also includes the hair and the nails. The function of the integumentary system is to separate the external environment from the internal environment of the body. It synthesizes vitamin D and has receptors for pain, pressure, and other nerve inputs. There's sweat glands and oil glands which maintain the temperature of the body. The skeletal system provides support for organs and framework for the muscles to provide movement. Within the bones, blood cells are formed, and bones are also a storage of minerals. The muscular system allows for movement, basically movement of the extremities, movement of blood throughout the cardiovascular system. It also provides for production of heat through the form of shivering. All this is accomplished by the muscular system. The nervous system is a control system of the body. It's fast acting. It responds to internal and external stimuluses and activates muscles or glands in response to those stimuli. Now, starting with this endocrine system, this will be covered in Anatomy Part 2. I'll briefly just mention the organ systems now for completeness sake. But the endocrine system also involves a control system. It's a little slower than the neurological control, but it regulates processes such as growth, reproduction, and nutrient use of the body cells. These are more long-term effects. The cardiovascular system transports blood, carrying oxygen and carbon dioxide, nutrients and waste throughout the body. The heart is there to pump the blood throughout the body. The lymphatic system and immune system is there to provide attacks against foreign substances that want to invade the body, such as viruses or bacteria. And the lymphatic system provides a place where our own white blood cells can fight off infection. The respiratory system is designed to keep the blood supplied with oxygen and for the removal of carbon dioxide from the blood. All this takes place in the air sacs of the lungs, called the alveoli. The digestive system is responsible for breaking down the food to absorbable units, and then those units of food byproducts are then absorbed into the bloodstream through the GI tract. That's all the function of the digestive system. The urinary system eliminates nitrogen waste throughout the body. It also regulates water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance of the blood. The reproductive system is responsible for producing offspring. Now, what are some survival needs for the human body? The human body needs several things for survival, without which it would make survival be difficult. First of all, there's nutrients. Nutrients are needed for chemical energy, for building cells, for growth. The chemicals come in the form of carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, or minerals and vitamins. Also, oxygen is an essential survival need. The body can only survive a few minutes without oxygen. Water is the most abundant chemical in the body. And water is important for the survival of the organism. Normal body temperature is also important to maintain a stable body temperature. Appropriate atmospheric pressures are necessary for life, for it allows for adequate breathing and gas exchange within the lungs. This is a term that you'll need to be familiar with, homeostasis. Homeostasis is used throughout this course. We'll come back to several examples of homeostasis throughout the course, but basically what homeostasis is the ability to maintain a relatively stable internal condition despite changes in the external environment. For example, your body temperature remains 98.6 whether you're in the desert or whether you're in a cold location. Your body has ways of maintaining this set point, if you will, and that's known as homeostasis. It's just the maintaining of that parameter within a normal range despite the ranges of the external environment. Homeostasis is controlled by three separate components. There's receptor, there's control center, and the effector. The receptors monitor the environment and respond to stimuli. The control center receives input from the receptor and determines the appropriate response. And the effector receives output from the control center and provides a movement in response to a stimulus. There's two types of stimulus involved in homeostasis. One is negative feedback and the other is positive feedback. Negative feedback is the most used feedback system in the body, and it basically reduces or shuts off the original stimulus in response to change of a body function. For example, regulation of body temperature. As the body temperature goes higher, mechanisms come into place to reduce or to have a negative effect on that temperature, so therefore it reduces the temperature. Here's an example through cartoon form of what homeostasis is. Say there's some stimulus that produces a change in a variable. That could be blood temperature, or it could be the concentration of sodium in the blood, whatever that parameter would be. There's many different parameters. But the stimulus produces a change in the variable. That's detected by a receptor. That receptor sends information to a control center, usually through nerves, connected nerves, although it could be used from a connection to the endocrine system. The control center sends out information through an effector pathway to an effector. The effector is usually a muscle or a gland that will allow for movement or secretion of a substance to try to counterbalance that change in the stimulus. So the response of the effector goes back to reduce the effect of the stimulus and return the variable to the homeostatic level. So if something starts to increase, then the body's mechanisms of homeostasis basically works to decrease that level and therefore keep it balanced. This is another example of negative feedback with blood glucose controlled by insulin. When blood glucose is increased, there are receptors that sense the increased blood sugar. The pancreas then secretes insulin into the blood. Insulin causes the body cells to absorb the glucose, which decreases the blood glucose level. And that way it has a negative feedback on the rise in glucose, and that brings it back to normal. This slide shows basically an example of temperature control. You see on the upper part of the slide, if temperature rises, the body gets warmer, then the increased temperature is sensed by receptors in the skin and the brain, control centers in the brain, and regulate the sweat glands, which produces reduction in temperature through evaporation of sweat from the body. If the body's temperature goes lower, it's cold, that triggers the skeletal muscles to shiver and therefore increase the body heat. So that each of these balance and brings the changes in body temperature back to normal. Positive feedback, an example of positive feedback is what happens when you have a microphone and a speaker, and you put the microphone in front of the speaker and it has a loud, ear-piercing, screeching sound. That's basically positive feedback. The sound is amplified through the microphone into the amplifier, and the amplifier sound is then picked up by the microphone and it's re-amplified again. It has a positive feedback loop. The sound is amplified over and over and over. This is also seen in the body, although it's not as common as negative feedback system. A couple examples of this seen in the body is labor contractions by the chemical oxytocin that enhances labor contractions, and also the formation of blood clotting and platelet plugs when there's a tear in the blood vessels. The clotting continues and it produces more clotting so that you have quick patching of the hole in the blood vessel. Here illustrates that. You have a tear in the blood vessel, positive feedback is initiated, platelets are released that adhere to the site, and they release chemicals, which then release more platelets, which then release more chemicals, which release more platelets, and it circles, and one part makes the other one increase. Eventually the cycle ends when the plug is formed, and this allows a rather rapid response to the tear in the blood vessel wall, so that the tear is plugged up fairly quickly through this positive feedback mechanism.